Good afternoon, everyone. It's Debbie and Rolo here again, and we're continuing with the second book in the Secret Adventures of Rolo series. This is the Chilvester Passage, and I'm continuing the story from where we left off yesterday. Rolo's just being fixated with the cheese that I have. He has a little bit of cheese and he knows then he's going to sit down and read with me. So he's completely fixated on the cheese. You need to sit down. Okay, so where we left off yesterday, Rolo had just come out of a passageway called the Chilvester Passage, and he has no idea where it's brought him to. The church, called St. Martin in the Fields, as I later found out, stood on a road on the edge of a square which had wide roads running all round it. A red bus went past with only one person on board. Then a black taxi with its orange light showing it was available for hire, and then another red bus. These were clues, I thought. Red buses, black cabs. I worked out that I was probably in London, but what year had I landed in? I spied a road sign and went closer to read the black letters on its white rectangular background. The name of the road was Duncannon Street. I wondered again why I had been brought to London. Something fluttering caught my eye, and I saw a crumpled up newspaper blowing across the square, being chased by a street cleaner working his patch during the quieter hours of the capital city. I chased it round a couple of fountains, pounced on it and held it down with my front paw so the cleaner, plugged into his music, could retrieve it and scoop it into his rubbish cart. This just gave me enough time to glance at the date on the top of the page, and it showed today's date. So I hadn't time travelled then, I was still in the present. The thought crossed my mind that I probably wouldn't be able to communicate with anyone. Not that the street cleaner looked like he wanted to start a conversation, with his earphones acting as a communication barrier. He patted me and threw me a bit of burger from a discarded polystyrene takeaway box before it joined the newspaper in the rubbish cart. I'm not proud when it comes to food. You know me, I'll eat anything. So I gobbled it up eagerly. Here I was then in central London in the middle of the night without a clue as to where I was to go. An important man on a very tall column looked down on me as I pondered my dilemma. He was guarded by 4 lions on each corner. No wonder he looked so impressive. I went back to the church and trotted up St. Martin's Lane, and then took a lottery of right turns and left turns, and, after about 20 minutes, saw a pedestrian sign to a hospital. I followed the direction it was pointing and eventually found myself outside a modern building. I walked under the canopy, drawn to an entrance painted in rainbow colours, lit up by bright lights from within, despite the lateness of the hour. This was a children's hospital. It seemed quite welcoming. I felt compelled to go in. Being small, I easily avoided detection at the front desk. The nighttime receptionist was engrossed in something on the screen in front of her. I trotted right past the desk, well below eye level. Thinking I wouldn't be able to reach the buttons in the lift and not too sure where I was heading, I thought I would take the stairs. There was no one in the stairwell, being past visiting time, and all the parents and carers had gone home to rest. Only the night staff were moving silently around the wards, quietly administering their care. I was out of breath when I reached the 4th floor, so I thought I'd have a look around in there. The heavy door from the stairwell pushed open with a swoosh, which momentarily disturbed the silence within. I held my breath. No one came. The silence was punctuated only by the occasional bleep of a machine. Now, as you know, I don't like high-pitched noises, they make me bark, but I knew that these machines were doing an important job of saving sick children, so I took the manly decision to keep my ears closed to the sound and to try and blot it out. Definitely no barking. The first thing I saw in a side ward were brightly coloured curtains decorated with cute puppies, pulled tightly closed around a bed. Further investigation, I shoved my head through the join in the curtains, showed that the occupant of the bed was a pretty little girl fast asleep with her arm propped around a teddy. She looked as if she shouldn't be in hospital at all. Her hair curled softly around her face and sprawled out like a spider on the pillow. It was a little damp where it touched her forehead. Her eyes were closed, but I bet underneath the lids they were sky blue. Then I noticed the tubes and wires attached to this little poppet. The sleep was perhaps not so peaceful, but necessary for healing. I could hear someone coming and ducked underneath her bed, where I was soon joined by the discarded teddy, who had landed face down with a soft plop beside me on the recently mopped, disinfectant-smelling tiled floor. I cocked up an ear and listened. 2 night sisters were having a murmured conversation in low tones on the other side of the curtains about a little girl called Hope, who had been in hospital for 2 weeks following an accident. The doctors were puzzled as to why she was still in a coma and trying to think of ways her family could possibly encourage her to regain consciousness. My instincts told me that her little body had shut down as part of the healing process, and I'm sure the medical staff knew that. One of the sisters bent down, and I saw a hand coming towards me under the bed. I pushed the discarded bear out with my front paw. Phew, that was close. The hand picked up the teddy bear and tucked it back into the bed covers next to the sleeping child. I listened to their muffled, retreating footsteps as they moved around the ward in their sensible shoes, tucking in strayed teddies and smoothing down beds on their rounds. When all was quiet once more in the ward and the sisters had departed, I hopped up onto Hope's bed, nudged the bear back onto the floor with a muttered apology, and snuggled into the little girl's side, just the same as I sometimes did in the morning with the floppy-haired boy if the stairgate was left open. I was careful not to disturb the wires and tubes. Hope stirred a little, and her breathing returned to its regular pattern. I snuggled in closer, hoping my live little furry body would somehow comfort her in a way that perhaps the static bear couldn't. We lay peacefully like this for hours, Hope and I, with me keeping watch, the steady rhythmic bleep of her machines, monitoring every breath. Just going to show you the drawing there. You can see Rolo snuggled in with Hope. As the sun crept around the blackout blind, I roused myself from this comfortable position. The ward was starting to stir, and soon there would be a flurry of hospital activity with the change from night to day shifts and the admittance of visitors after the rounds of the medical staff. Much as I didn't want to leave this little girl's side, I knew I would have to find my way back home and into my basket pretty sharpish before the smiley lady awoke and I was missed. I jumped down off the bed and as an afterthought picked up the poor bear and tucked it back into the warm spot that I'd just vacated next to Hope. The London streets were coming to life and I knew I had to move quickly. I found my way down tree-lined avenues and busy roads with names which flashed past in a blur, names like Holborn, Bloomsbury Way, Monmouth Street, and at last the familiar St Martin's Lane. And there I saw the important man with his back to me, the lions still alert and the pigeons just arriving for their daily begging. I scampered round the railings to the Talbot Cafe sign and wondered what I had to do to open the Chilvester Passage from the London end. I sniffed around the bottom of the sign and nudged it upwards with my nose, and miraculously it opened, just enough to squeeze my head and then my shoulders through the gap. I edged the rest of my body through and dropped into the darkness of the passage on the other side. I heard the board bang down into place behind me and looked round for my tiny lamp bearer. I needn't have worried. She was there waiting for me. "Well, Paddy Paws, you're later than I expected. Did you work out what you had to do?" she asked as she hurried me along the dark passage. "I found Hope, who looked like she needed some companionship," I replied wearily and longed for my basket. I left Yulia standing in the tunnel behind the dog mural and once more skittered across the tiled floor to the west door of the church. It was still dark outside. I glanced up at the church clock and it said it was just before 7. Plenty of time to get home and into my basket before anyone in the house stirred. I was thankful for long winter nights and snuggled down in my bed, worrying about that little girl. My next opportunity to visit Hope came sooner than expected. The following evening, the smiley lady and floppy-haired boy were going out to dinner with friends who owned cats, so they put me to bed much earlier than usual. Of course, I didn't object, although they kept apologising and promised me treats upon their return. As soon as I heard the car exit the drive, I knew the coast was clear. It would have been helpful if they'd given me a lift into town, but of course they didn't know that. The main door of the church was open because there were a couple of people setting up seating for an evening concert. I strolled in unseen and then skirted the inside of the church walls, keeping in the shadows and hiding behind the grand piano until the men had finished arranging the chairs for the expected audience. I approached the dog mural and felt the same anticipation and frisson of excitement as I had felt the previous time. However, the edges did not blur and the door did not open. I didn't know what to do. I ducked into the lady chapel as the shifters were about to move the grand piano into concert position. I was bitterly disappointed. There was nothing else for it but to go home. I slept for a while in my basket. A few hours later, my people came home, patted me, fed me with a bit of steak fat saved from their meal, and went upstairs to bed. Yulia and the owl tapped on the window. "Yulia," I mouthed through the glass, "why wouldn't the Chilvester Passage open? What is it that I need? Is it the pink ball? I tried to return to see Hope this evening." "Ah, sorry, Paddy Paws, I forgot to tell you. The Chilvester Passage only opens when the clock strikes 12. Come, Athelstan needs you. A local adventure tonight. You're off to Devizes." I put a brave face on and pushed Hope to the back of my mind for now and opened the kitchen cupboard under the sink, moving the bottles and bucket to reveal the trapdoor. So that's the end of that chapter. And then we move on to Rolo and the Moonrakers and Rolo and the World Cup, both of which I have read to you previously. And I will pick up the story again tomorrow afternoon at 3:30. So Rolo will return to London and I will let you know what happens to the little girl called Hope. So thank you very much for listening. Rolo's disappeared. He's had 2 walks today and he's fed up with sitting on my lap. So we'll join you again tomorrow afternoon. Thank you very much for listening. Bye.